Hey guys, before we get started, I just want to give you a sneak peek of what my next two videos will be about in case you like this one. One will be a guide for what the best enchants are for each piece of gear, and which classes could take advantage of those. And the other video will be about how to maximize the amount of AP you get per run. And you can see from the thumbnail, my team is probably one of the highest scoring runs in the game. We got 2300 AP in Exemplar, which is about 2750 AP without counting the penalty. We've really mastered getting AP since we've all hit Demigod and Trios multiple times. So subscribe to the channel to catch those videos when they go live, and I hope you guys enjoy this one. Thanks for watching. How's it going, guys? So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can build a perfect kit for any class in Dark and Darker. Most of the highest ranked players in this game are all running very similar kits, but how did they come up with the exact pieces needed for an optimal setup? Well, the secret actually lies in the attribute system of the game. You need to understand how each attribute works before you can put together the perfect kit. So every class has the same primary attributes like strength or dexterity, and every class starts with 105 attribute points that are spread out among these primary attributes. Your items enhance these primary attributes by adding points into them, and enchantments on your items can also enhance secondary attributes that are associated under each primary attribute. To understand how to build great kits, you need to first understand how each attribute scales as you add more points into it. Attributes don't have linear scaling, so each point you add into an attribute isn't guaranteed to have the same effectiveness as a previous point. The confusing part is, some attributes actually become more effective after you reach a certain amount of points in them, rather than becoming less effective with each point. This is why an optimal kit has a mixture of stats, and takes advantage of diminishing return breakpoints to get the maximum value out of each attribute. Okay, so I just said a bunch of confusing stuff, and maybe a lot of it went over your head, but it'll make a lot more sense once you see this example. And I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm not going to go into every attribute and every class, but we'll just do one, and once you see how it works, you'll be able to apply that to your own class. So the attribute we're going to look at is knowledge. And knowledge is a great attribute for clerics, wizards, and warlocks. So on the wiki here, you have a stats page, and the stats page will show you each of the primary attributes and also the secondary stats that each of the primary attributes give you. So if we go to knowledge, we're going to see that each point we put into knowledge is going to give us spellcasting speed, some memory capacity, and some memory recovery. Now, we're going to ignore these two for now. Memory recovery is nice, capacity is obviously very nice, especially with 10 spell clerics being a thing now. But the main reason people build knowledge is spellcasting speed, once they have enough memory, of course. So you can see that each point of knowledge is going to give us a certain amount of these secondary stats. So if you look at a lot of the top wizard players and look at the kits that they build, they actually target a specific knowledge value, and that's going to be somewhere between 40 and 45 knowledge. And if you look at this curve here for spellcasting speed, you'll understand why wizards and clerics are building this much knowledge. So wizard doesn't actually need this much memory, the memory that 45 knowledge gives you, but what they do need is the spellcasting speed. The spellcasting speed is one of the most important stats for these caster classes, and that's because the faster you cast, the faster you move. So if you think about it, casting speed is the same as mobility for wizards and warlocks, and those classes are all very mobility dependent. You want to minimize the amount of time you spend casting, because when your character is casting, you can't move, right? So that's why faster casts means less downtime for your mobility and more movement, basically. So you can think of spellcasting speed as move speed. Now, that doesn't mean we want every single piece of our gear to be knowledge and all our rings to be knowledge, pendant knowledge, cape knowledge. You can see that after we reach 45 knowledge, there's really not much extra value we're going to get from the extra knowledge points. I mean, it's not terrible. We're still getting 2%, but you can see between 30 and 40, we're getting 4%, right? This is why a lot of people target 40 knowledge as the ideal spot. You're getting a ton of value building knowledge between 30 and 40, and stopping at 40 is a great spot. And then from there, focus the rest of your gear on other stats that, you know, classes like wizards and clerics need, which is vigor is a great stat. They need health to stay alive. You can also build will. Will scales up your damage and your healing. So when you're building a kit, you know, knowledge is the first thing you target on those classes, and then you put points into, you know, the other attributes. So you don't really want to go above 45 knowledge. Now, I actually made a calculator for some of the classes that I play. And one of those classes is Cleric. So this is just a little calculator, because there's really no gear calculators for Dark and Darker, or not one that I could find. So I just made this for myself to help me visualize what it would look like to put together like a kit. And if I put in, you know, different attribute gear, like what will my end stats be, right? That's what I really wanted to see. So I put in the Cleric space stats. You can see they start off with a good amount of knowledge, 20. They start off with a ton of will, which is great. But we're trying to end up with around 40 to 45 knowledge. So, you know, I mix and match different pieces. Obviously, you know, for Clerics, you have lots of options for your helm. You have lots of options for your chest. You have Templars, you have Oracle Robe. But I played around with it, and I found the best like pieces to end up with the ideal stats. And you can see this exact setup ends you up with almost 300 move speed, which is insanely high, because Cleric actually is one of the slower classes in the game. They start off with negative move speed, basically, because their agility is in 15. And, you know, we still have 130 HP. We have 43 knowledge, enough for all 10 of our spells, enough for ideal amount of casting speed. And we have 40 will almost, so our spells are potent. And on here, I even put in some of the best enchantments for each piece. And this calculation takes into account that you have the best enchant on all your pieces. Now, obviously, magical healing is super bis for Cleric. But not every piece can have magical healing, right? That's why there's some other enchants. Now, I'm going to have a separate video that's dedicated to what's the best enchant on every piece of gear for each class. I'll go over that in another video I have planned. But for this video, I just want you to understand how we come up with these breakpoints, like 45 knowledge. How do we come up with that? It's simply the spellcasting curve here. And spellcasting, the sweet spot is 45 or 40, depending on how much memory you want. But even, you know, up to 45 is pretty solid for those caster classes. And then if we look at our will, so let's say you hit your 45 knowledge, then we put in some will gear on, and you can see in my little spreadsheet I made here, I have a will necklace, some will rings, and then boots. I have vigor boots because I don't, you know, with this exact setup, I'll have 40 will, 43 knowledge, and I can put in points to the extra stats like agility and vigor. So this is what I use. I got Demigod in 3s, playing Cleric and playing Bard, so I really tested these optimal kits. And this isn't like the best kit possible, right? If you had unlimited gold, you could definitely make a better kit. This is more like a mid-level kit. You would, like, first week of wipe, you're running this, you know, you're playing HR, picking up purples. This is like the casual kit anyone can pick up in a dungeon and build. The only really hard piece on here is the gold cape, but again, early wipe, you're focusing on getting your purples, and then the next upgrade after you have like pretty much good purples with good enchants is gold cape. None of the other craftables are anywhere near as good as the golden cape. So if you want to focus on one craftable to put your effort into getting, the gold cape is by far the biggest upgrade. And that's for any class. And that's simply because 3 all attributes is insanely broken. And none of the other golden gear gives you anything close to that. So gold capes, but if you don't have a gold cape, obviously just replace this with like a 5 knowledge cape, you know, 5 will, just whatever. The main thing is you're targeting the sweet spots of knowledge and will, and once you hit those, then, you know, put the rest of your gear into vigor. You know, you don't really need too much strength or agi on Cleric, because this build is pretty light. See, you can see I calculated the move speed. Since 10 spell Cleric came out, Clerics are running, you know, very light gear, right? It's more robes, not so much plate anymore. So move speed isn't really a huge problem, but it also depends on what kind of comp you're running, right? There's also other builds like Frontline Cleric where you want to be a little tankier, but we're not really going to get into that. The main point I wanted you guys to understand is how we came up with the ideal value of knowledge and will. And for will, the ideal value is around 40, and that's for your magic power bonus. You can see magic power is like 1-to-1 with will. Each point of will gives you magic power. Each point of magic power gives you magic power bonus. And the sweet spot of magic power bonus, and this is how you determine the damage of your magical spells and their healing power. The sweet spot is 40, right? You can see from 15 to 21, we're getting 2.5% for each point of will. That's great. Between 21 and 40, we're getting 2%. And beyond 40 will, we're not getting that much more value. We're getting 1%. So it cuts in half, right? From 2% to 1%. So above 40, we don't really want that much more will. Put your points into something else like vigor, and you'll get more out of those attribute points. Another example we can look at is Bard. So Bard was the first class that got Demigod in on Trios. And this Bard build I put together takes advantage of Resourcefulness being a really broken stat. So Bard actually has one of the most complicated builds in the game, because if you take a look at the attribute page, so under Dexterity, there's a stat called Manual Dexterity, and that determines how quickly Bard plays an instrument. And then there's also a stat under Resourcefulness. It's called Persuasiveness. Persuasiveness determines how long the duration of the Bard songs are. So Bard actually has two substats that only apply to Bard and no other class. So no other class has these, secondary stats that only apply to that class. This is what makes the optimal Bard build pretty difficult to figure out, but I can see I made the calculator for it. The target values we're aiming for is 35 Resourcefulness. This is where you have the maximum value of your song duration. Now, most of the songs, like your Rousing Rhythms, your Harmonic Shield, having extra duration is just quality of life. It doesn't actually give you a benefit, because a Bard that doesn't have any Resourcefulness, they're also going to have the same songs. They're going to have the same buffs on, right? But the real value of Resourcefulness is in Accelerando and Allegro. Accelerando, Allegro have very small base duration, like 6 seconds or something like that. And when you stack Resourcefulness, you can actually get your Accelerando, Allegro, and those are insane buffs. They only last 6 seconds because they're super strong. They give cast speed, action speed, and 21 flat move speed on Accelerando. And in Trios, those are really, really powerful buffs. So you can get your Accelerando Allegro to 20 seconds by building Resourcefulness up to 35, depending on obviously the will of the class you're hitting it with. But 20 seconds of plus 21 move speed for your whole team. That's why a lot of the top Bard players build Resourcefulness. And how much Resourcefulness do they build? It's 35. And if you look at there's no curve here, but you can see the values. Between 0 and 35, each res will give you 1 point. Between 35 and 70, it's half a point. So what this means is after 35, you're not getting as much value out of your Resourcefulness. So don't build it beyond 35. But 35 will get you a nice, sweet spot for your songs. And then for Bards, the other sweet spot they need is Dexterity, right? So Dexterity, it's broken up into multiple subcategories. Let me show you real quick. So, I didn't mean to go super deep into Bard because it needs its own video, but the Dexterity gives you action speed, regular action speed, just like opening chests, not really that huge, but it also gives you manual Dexterity, how quickly the Bard plays an instrument. And in fights, Bard's song playing speed is super, super important. Like how fast you can play your Allegro Accelerando right before an engage, how fast you can play Weakness and Lament. Those are super, super powerful songs. And by the way, those songs also scale off Resourcefulness. So, Shriek of Weakness and Lament, if you have the Resourcefulness build, they're lasting 30-40 seconds on your opponent. 30-40 seconds of a minus 20 move speed. That's insanely broken. So definitely res build is OP. But how do we get the optimal song playing speed? Again, just look at the curve. Where does the value drop off at? Between 15 to 23 Dexterity, we're getting 3%, great value. Between 23 to 31, we're getting 2%, okay, still nice value. And then beyond 31, if you're getting 1% or 0.5%, you can see it falls off pretty quickly. You can see the curve starts to flatten. So the amount of value you're getting, the sweet spot is around 31, right? You can also go up to 37. Now, that's just for the song playing speed. Dexterity also gives you action speed, so there's reason to build Dexterity beyond 31, but if you're just trying to make your songs faster, then 31 is the ideal sweet spot. and that's what I hit. But there's other bard builds where you can go up to like, you know, 45 if you just want a lot of action speed and just swing your rapier super fast if you have a true physical damage build, and it's a great build. I've tried it, but again, you can see the power of this kit optimization. This is what I like to call it. This bard build, 312 movement speed without buffs. This is, oh actually no, this counts buffs. 301 move speed, no buffs, and then, you know, you have 150 HP almost. You have res, so you're still a support class, but a support class with 150 HP. I mean, and you're doing a ton of damage if you actually pick up all the right enchants on bard. So this kit is super optimized. This is how I got Demigod and Trios on one of the most competitive servers, US East, against all the streamer teams. So trust me, I played against all the top teams, and this was one of the best builds we ran in a few different comps. But again, how do we come up with the build? Sweet spot for resourcefulness, hit the sweet spot for dexterity, dump the remaining points into strength and vigor, depending on what you're trying to do with your comp. So that's how I came up with the optimal bard build. And I'll put in the ranger build on the screen. You know, rangers, you'll see every ranger have between 40 and 50 dexterity. Again, they're trying to hit the action speed sweet spot, which is, you know, 41. This is where you have 34% action speed. So it's not 41 dexterity, because dexterity has, you know, 75% effectiveness. It's somewhere between 41 and 50. But basically, you want between 40 and 50 dexterity on ranger. And this build captures a good amount of dexterity to have nice action speed with longbows. And you can see every top ranger runs this pretty much exact build. And then from there, you want to put the rest of your points into strength and as much physical power bonus as you can get. So not only are you shooting fast, but you're doing a ton of damage with each arrow. So this is like a kit optimized ranger build. The enchants aren't updated, I believe. Yeah, you see they say magical healing, so ignore the enchants, but the rest of it is pretty solid for sure. And again, I'll do another video dedicated to best enchants for every piece. Okay, but that's it, guys. That's all I want to show you. Just understand those attribute sweet spots. You know, look at these graphs, these curves, and you'll be able to build a kit for any class. You just need to make sure you're not overloading on one stat and suffering for it, right? I see some people in like the Bard Discord, they're like, look at my kit, I have 55 resourcefulness. Well, we know from looking at the wiki that 55 resourcefulness is not a good build. You're getting half value out of every resourcefulness beyond 35. The rest of those points could have been used somewhere else for more value. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found it helpful. Stay tuned for more educational videos.